I jolted awake to the sound of heavy footsteps storming down the hall. My heart hammered as I curled around my belly, shielding my unborn child from the rage I knew was coming. The door flew open and Dane's hulking frame filled the doorway, reeking of cigarettes and stale beer. "Get up," he barked, grabbing my arm and wrenching me off the bed. I cried out as pain exploded through my shoulder. "The baby," I gasped. "Do you think I care about that thing?" He threw me to the floor. "This is my house. You serve me." Tears flooded my eyes. This was not the tender man I had fallen in love with 2 years ago. Dane had shown me affection and stability when I had none, had needed it so desperately after my parents died. My brother Tobin took me in, but soon had a family of his own to provide for. When we met, Dane made me feel safe, hopeful. Now he was a stranger, consumed by rage and jealousy. "On your feet," Dane snapped, kicking me in the ribs. I curled around my belly, shielding the tiny life within. "Please," I prayed my child would be spared from his fury. Dane grabbed my hair and yanked my head back. "Look at me," he bellowed. I obeyed, steeling myself. His eyes, once warm, were now hard and ruthless. "You will learn respect." He drew back his fist. I braced for the impact, for the explosion of pain. Crash! The front door splintered open. Heavy footsteps pounded toward us. Tobin and Kira burst into the room, faces twisted in rage at the sight of me cowering before my husband. "Get away from her!" Tobin roared, grabbing Dane and slamming him against the wall. My brother's strength had always paled next to Dane's bulk, but now Tobin's fury made him formidable. Kira rushed toward me, horror etched across her delicate features. "Alara!" "My God!" She helped me sit up, her touch infinitely gentle next to the abuse I had become accustomed to. I leaned into her embrace, overwhelmed with gratitude. "She's my wife," Dane spat at Tobin. "This is none of your business." "The hell it isn't." Tobin's eyes blazed. "She's coming with us. If you come near her again, I swear to God I'll kill you." I trembled in Kira's arms. Could this nightmare finally be over? Dane wrenched out of Tobin's grasp. For a moment, the two men stared each other down. My husband's eyes promised revenge for this humiliation. But seeing my protectors filled me with something long absent from my life. Hope. Whatever came next, at least I would not face it alone. At least my child would be born free of Dane's tyranny. I placed a hand over my belly, soothing the little flutter within. As Tobin and Kira led me safely into the light of day, I swore my unborn son or daughter would never suffer my fate. Not when I had two guardians willing to stand up to the dark. I winced as Kira dabbed antiseptic on my swollen lip. We sat in her and Tobin's tiny kitchen while my brother paced, raking his hands through his hair. "Why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" Tobin asked, agony etched on his face. My tongue probed the tender split in my lip. "I was ashamed," I whispered, "and scared. Dane said if I told anyone." I shook my head, tears burning. Tobin crouched before me, gentle despite his fury. "Alara, listen to me. That bastard will never lay a hand on you again. I swear it." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Since our parents died, Tobin had been my guardian angel. He was the one who introduced me to Dane after I couldn't find work. My brother only wanted what was best. How could he have known? Fresh tears welled up. I dashed them away, wincing at the throb in my cheekbone. Kira tenderly grasped my hands. "We'll get you and the baby to safety," she said softly. "My sister and Freystone can shelter you both." I shook my head wildly. "He'll find me. He'll." I couldn't finish. Just thinking of Dane's wrath made me shudder. A knock on the door made everyone freeze. Heavy footsteps crossed the porch, then came the splintering of wood. "Alara!" Dane's roar was pitiless. I leapt up, heart hammering. "Like hell," Tobin growled, rolling up his sleeves. He met my terrified eyes. "I'll handle this." He pulled open the door before Dane could break it down. My husband towered on the porch, murderous rage twisting his features. "That little bitch is my property," he spat at Tobin. "She's coming back with me." Tobin didn't flinch. "The hell she is. You come near my sister again, I'll make you regret it." Dane drove his fist into Tobin's jaw. My brother reeled but stayed upright, the fists clenched. Fresh panic flooded me. Tobin was brave, but no match for Dane's ruthless strength. I couldn't let anyone else suffer for my sake. I had to protect this newfound glimmer of hope for my baby's future. Steeling myself, I stepped between the two men. "Please, Dane," I whispered, despising the trembling in my voice. "Don't hurt him. I'll come home with you." Silent tears traced my swelling cheek. Dane grabbed my throat, his lips twisting in a ruthless smile. "That's my good, obedient wife," he purred. Over his shoulder, I watched Tobin's face transform with rage and anguish. But I silently pleaded for him not to act, not when it would cost more than I could bear. I let Dane drag me outside, back into the waiting maw of darkness. Everything in me screamed to resist, but my child's safety had to come first. I could only pray my self-sacrifice would buy Tobin and Kira enough time to stop Dane for good. If not, then may God have mercy on me and my baby, because my husband never would. Dane dragged me back into the apartment, his grip like iron on my arm. He shoved me onto the tattered sofa and stood with arms crossed, glaring down at me. My stomach churned with dread. I rested my palms on my swollen belly as if I could shield my child from my husband's ire. Knowing now that his violence could target even an unborn baby made me sick with fear. "How long?" Dane demanded. I raised my eyes hesitantly. "How long? What?" His hand cracked across my cheek. I gasped, more startled than pained. "How far along is the bastard child you're carrying?" My hand flew protectively to my stomach. My son or daughter was no bastard. This baby was all that was pure and good in my wretched life. 6 months, I whispered, dropping my gaze once more. A malevolent smile spread across Dane's face. "So you lay with another while swearing to be faithful to me?" "Never!" I cried out. "You know this is your child. You know that I have been true." Dane only chuckled darkly. "Come now, Alara. Do you really expect me to believe that pathetic whelp Tobin is man enough to give you a baby when I have failed?" Shock reverberated through me. Tobin? My brother? Comprehension slammed into my core. Dane had always resented Tobin's easy confidence, his effortless ability to provide for his family despite Dane's superior social standing and wealth. And judging by the lustful glances he had thrown Kira's way at our wedding, Dane had envied them their true and easy intimacy. This was merely another manifestation of Dane's jealousy and spite toward my only real protector, the man I considered my true family. I stood on trembling legs, fists clenched at my sides. "Tobin is twice the man you will ever be." I spat with every shred of courage I could muster. I raised my hand and slapped Dane hard across the face. His head jerked sideways. Disbelief flashed in his eyes as his cheek flushed an angry red. I braced myself for his retaliation, but none came. Instead, his lips slowly twisted into a terrifying smile. "Well, well. The mouse finally shows her teeth," Dane purred, rubbing his jaw. "I was beginning to think you'd lost your fire entirely." He moved towards me with sudden speed, backing me up against the wall. With my swollen belly hindering my escape, I had nowhere to go as Dane placed his palms flat on the faded wallpaper beside my head and leaned in close enough for me to smell the coffee on his breath. "Let's make one thing clear, wife," he said, the threat in his voice sending shivers down my spine. "You belong to me now and forevermore, and whatever bastard seed festers in your womb means nothing to me. So you play nice, my pet, or you will learn what true suffering is." Days blurred into weeks as I drifted through a haze of fear and despair. Dane's abuse escalated. It was as if my show of defiance had awakened a sleeping beast within him. Bruises flowered on my arms and back from his rough handling. I hid them under long sleeves, not willing to invite more of his twisted accusations. My only joy came from the flutters deep within, as my baby grew healthy and strong, oblivious to the darkness surrounding its arrival. I endured it all in silence, resolute in my vow to protect this innocent life. One night, Dane came home in a drunken rage. I scrambled off the sofa as he stormed through the door and grabbed my arm, his grip crushing. "Worthless bitch!" he roared. "Can't even keep the house clean." He flung me aside and I crashed into the coffee table. Pain exploded through my hip. I curled around my belly, shielding my unborn child from the brunt of the fall. Dane loomed closer, fists clenched. Then came a pounding at the front door. "Alara!" Tobin's voice was a clarion call. My brother threw open the door. Rage etched on his face at the sight of me cringing on the floor. Kira was right behind him. Dane wheeled on them with a guttural snarl. "Get out! She's my property!" Tobin's punch smashed into Dane's jaw. My husband reeled backwards, shock and fury twisting his expression. Tobin grabbed his shirt and slammed him against the wall. "She is my sister!" Each word was punctuated by the impact of Tobin's fist against Dane's face. My brother was slender compared to Dane's bulk, but rage made him formidable. Kira rushed to my side, collapsing beside me. Her hand gently grasped mine. "Alara, we have to go," she pleaded. "Can you stand?" I watched the brawl with detachment, the pain in my hip receding behind the adrenaline flooding my veins. Tobin was buying us time. This was our chance. With Kira's help, I struggled to my feet, one hand supporting my heavy belly. She wrapped her arm around my waist and led me towards sweet freedom, where her car waited by the curb. A roar echoed behind us. I glanced back to see Dane rear up and charge, face twisted in psychotic fury. Before I could scream a warning, he slammed into Tobin's side, driving them both to the floor. "No!" I shrieked. Terror crested and broke as I watched Dane's fists rise and fall, pummeling Tobin where he lay defenseless. Kira and I surged back into the apartment. She grabbed Dane's discarded whiskey bottle and swung with all her might. Glass shattered against his skull, and he collapsed sideways with a guttural groan. In the echoing silence, Tobin struggled to rise. Welts and blood masked his gentle features, but his voice was firm as he grasped my shoulder. "It's over, Alara. You're safe now." As we left Dane's broken form behind, I knew my brother spoke the truth. We had weathered the darkness and emerged into dawn's hopeful light. The long road to healing stretched before me, but with Tobin and Kira beside me, I feared nothing, not anymore. Kira pressed a mug of steaming tea into my trembling hands. I sat on their sagging sofa, wrapped in a blanket, still struggling to process the night's events. My brother's face was purpled with bruises, but the set of his jaw was resolute. "Dane will come after us when he wakes," I whispered. Tobin crouched before me, his blue eyes, so like our father's, gentle but determined. "He won't get near you again. I let him fool me once. It won't happen twice." The weight of all they had sacrificed for my sake threatened to crush me. "You can't know that," I pleaded. "You don't know what he's capable of." Kira squeezed my shoulder. "Whatever comes, we'll face together." A pounding on the front door made me jolt, sloshing hot liquid over my shaking hands. Tobin spun, placing himself between me and the sound. Kira's hand slipped into her skirt pocket, fingers wrapping around what I knew to be a compact pistol. The pounding came again, more insistent. Tobin wrenched the door open, muscles coiled to attack, then went rigid with shock. I peered around him to see Dane slumped on the porch, face swollen and stained with blood and dirt. One eye was sealed shut by bruising, and his right arm hung at an odd angle. But somehow he smiled through split and swollen lips when he saw me cringing behind my brother. "Alara," he rasped, digging his heels in as if to stand. "You're my wife." Tobin shoved him back down with one hand. "Like hell she is. How did you find us?" Dane coughed, then spit a wad of blood onto the weathered boards. "Wasn't hard," he grunted. "I'm an old friend of the family, after all." Confusion knifed through me. I clutched Tobin's shoulder with my free hand, my stomach roiling as dread crept up my spine. What is he talking about? Tobin's shoulders curled inward, like a weight was settling over him. He turned and grasped my hands with gentle urgency. "Alara, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you long ago." He guided me back inside, nodding for Kira to watch Dane. Then he sat me on the sofa and crouched before me again, regret and anguish chasing each other across his face. "I've known Dane far longer than you have, little sister. We were childhood friends. Practically brothers." Tobin's voice dropped to a pained whisper. I never dreamed he was capable of such darkness, that he would turn the affection I once felt into this madness. The shattered pieces of my reality cut fresh wounds across my soul. I stared at my brother through a film of tears, my voice barely a tremulous breath. "How could you bring this monster into our family?" Tobin grasped my hands, his skin rough and so achingly familiar. "I swear to you, Alara, I will spend my life making amends." Behind him, Kira stepped onto the porch, pistol raised. My brother's eyes hardened with ruthless purpose. "But first, we end this." I winced as Kira examined the dark bruises wringing my throat. Her green eyes blazed with fury, but her voice was gentle. "Alara, why protect him?" she asked. I turned my face away, ashamed. It had been 1 month since our escape from Dane. 1 month since I had collapsed sobbing in Kira's arms after Tobin revealed their history with my tormentor, the man I had once hoped to call husband. Tobin wanted to end Dane permanently, but I convinced him not to tarnish his soul for my sake. So Dane rotted in prison while we pieced together the fragments of our lives. But yesterday Dane had cornered me on the courthouse steps, public and bold as you please. His parole hearing was scheduled despite my testimony. His eyes promised revenge even as they drank in my face. When his hands closed around my throat, relishing my pulse, none intervened until I sank into darkness. I awoke to Kira tending my injuries, Tobin bellowing at the chief of police. But the strangle marks branding my flesh also marked the imprint of Dane's soul on mine. He thought to reclaim me, and perhaps a dark part of my spirit longed to revisit his particular hell. Kira grasped my shoulders. Dane wants you to protect him. Don't give him that power. I shut my eyes against a rush of anguished tears. In my mind's eye I saw the innocent love shining from Dane's eyes when we wed. I heard the whispered promises that bound my heart to his with silken threads, now thorns embedded there for eternity. Suddenly my grief turned to iron in my chest. What had it gotten me but a succession of bruises, walking on eggshells in my own home, flinching at every loud noise? I would carry Dane's fingerprints for life, etched onto my very soul. No more. I dashed the tears away and straightened my spine. Kira watched wariness dawn into pride as she recognized the birth of her ally. Dane took everything from me, I said quietly. Even now he thinks I'm his possession, but no longer. At Tobin's protest, I slipped from the shelter of their apartment the next dawn. I knew where Dane breakfasted those early mornings, where the demons inside him drowned their thirst, if only briefly. I felt his eyes on me the moment I entered, heard his smug greeting as I slid behind his chair in the shadowed corner, felt his shock as I pressed cold metal to his throat and whispered, "This is for every bruise I ever hid, for every night you threatened the life inside me." His sudden pallor was gratifying, the pleading in his eyes even more so. Let him experience one fraction of the powerlessness he inflicted on me for years. "You created a monster," I murmured. "I'll see you buried and cold before I let you crawl back into my thoughts." When I walked back into the dawning light alone, Tobin saw the transformation in my face. His shoulders straightened as he realized the fight flowing bright and fierce in my veins. We would see this through, brother and sister, bound by blood and scars. No ghost would haunt me ever again. I straightened my skirt with sweat-slicked palms, struggling to still the tremors in my hands. The courthouse loomed before me, a monument to justice, about to be served. Tobin gave my fingers a gentle, bracing squeeze. "Are you ready for this?" he asked solemnly. At my terse nod, he pushed open the heavy doors. The cavernous courtroom vibrated with anticipation. I kept my chin high, ignoring the whispers that followed us down the aisle. In my arms, I cradled my infant son, swaddled tightly against my chest. His tiny body anchored me as we took our place behind the prosecutor. The judge entered, black robes swirling. The room rose respectfully. As we sat, the doors behind the bench flew open. 2 officers led Dane in handcuffs to the defendant's table. His glare seared me the moment he entered. I forced myself to meet it steadily, cradling my son closer. Dane's eyes dropped to the bundle in my arms, upper lip curling in a sneer. Then he turned away, leaning casually back in his chair to survey the audience with an air of bored indifference. My testimony was brutal in its honesty. I recounted every horror of our marriage in vivid detail, the manipulation that lured me in, each humiliating abuse, his vow to make my child suffer for my imagined sins. "He is a monster," I finished quietly, "one who hides behind a mask of civility and charm, but beneath lies the heart of a soulless coward." Dane merely examined his nails, but the tightening of his jaw revealed my words had hit their mark. Exhibit by exhibit, we built the irrefutable case against my husband. Hospital records showed old injuries consistent with abuse. Witnesses attested to seeing Dane attack me in public. The gun Kira had used to subdue him during my escape bore only Tobin's clean prints. Dane's confident expression slowly shifted to incredulity, then fury as his web of lies collapsed around him. At the first crack in his superior mask, vindication roared within me. I watched, spine ruler straight, as he took the stand in his own reckless defense. Dane painted himself the long-suffering husband to an unfaithful wife. His son was no child of his, he claimed. My infidelity had invited punishment. "Lies!" The word ripped from my throat before Tobin could restrain me. Every eye turned my way, but I only had eyes for Dane as I gently handed my son to Kira. Then I stalked forward, my entire body shaking with outrage accumulated from years of silence. You dare stand there and besmirch what you have brutalized? My voice echoed off the arched ceilings. The only falsehoods spoken here are falling from your forked tongue. I spun to appeal to the stony-faced jurors. What is the word of a pregnant woman, one who has only shown compassion her entire life, against that of a proven violent offender, of a man whose charm and standing make his threat all the more sinister? My words dropped into absolute silence, but for my son's soft gurgle. I walked back to Kira, gentling my tone as I lifted the baby to my cheek. The only innocence in this room lies in my arms, gentlemen. I implore you, do not let it be corrupted by the poison of this serpent. The foreman's eyes shone bright. Behind him, Dane sank into his seat, recognition of his defeat breaking across his face at last. I blinked against the brilliant sunlight, pausing at the foot of the courthouse steps. Tobin and Kira flanked me like patient sentinels while I adjusted the strap of the baby carrier across my chest. My son burbled happily, his tiny hand curled around my finger. The click of a lighter made me glance over. Across the street, half hidden by a copse of trees, Dane lifted the dancing flame to the cigarette between his lips. His eyes locked with mine over the sparking light, flat and cold in his expressionless face. He took a long, slow drag, wreathed by tendrils of smoke that faded on the breeze between us. There was no menace in that penetrating stare today, only grudging acceptance that his empire of lies had fallen at last. I gazed back levelly, seeing the man before me with new clarity. Just a sad, bitter soul who knew no other way to live except by extinguishing the light of others. Well, no longer. The small flame of innocence in my arms would grow into a bonfire of joy and self-worth that no one could ever dampen. I would make certain of it. I blinked, and Dane was gone, leaving only the lingering, acrid scent of tobacco hanging beneath the trees. Tobin's hand gripped my shoulder. "It's time to put the ghost to rest, Alara," he said gently. His eyes sought mine, bright with purpose. "I think it's time we went home." I let the words settle comfortingly around my heart as Tobin led us to the car where Kira waited. Home. A safe harbor I had not known in years, save for the shelter of my guardians through the storm. But as we navigated out of the bustling city into gentle hills mantled in emerald, my breath caught at the sight of home emerging through the dappled light. The cottage was just as I remembered, whitewashed walls festooned with vines and brilliant flowers, wide windows welcoming golden sunlight to kiss the polished wood floors within. It was the only real home I had known since our parents' deaths. Tobin had given up the property to follow his career in the city, had built his new life tethered in chains to Dane without even knowing. Now we had come full circle to mend and forge fresh bonds on beloved soil. I crossed the threshold into crisp, sweet air, redolent of fresh bread and dried lavender. Vases overflowed with flowers from Tobin and Kira's garden. I stroked their velvety petals, overwhelmed with gratitude for their silent reassurance that beauty could bloom in even the most scorched earth. My son's new nursery shone with honeyed light, awaiting us to build new memories within its walls. And through the windows I could glimpse the sun-drenched hill where Mama, Papa, and I once picnicked among the riotous wildflowers, where Papa had held my tiny hands as I took my first graceful steps into the world. I would walk there with my son when he was old enough, would cradle Papa's gentle wisdom and Mama's courage imprinted on my heart to share with my beautiful boy. He would never walk alone. I would battle any monster plaguing his little mind or darkening the horizon before I allowed it to haunt him, as I had been haunted. As I stood watching my son sleep, his tiny chest rising and falling in blissful peace, Tobin appeared silently beside me. Without turning, I slipped my hand into his larger one with a contented sigh. The ghosts were fading now with the breaking dawn, stripped of their power at last. My battle was won. But the war wages on, as long as light remains to fight the encroaching dark. I rested my head on Tobin's shoulder, floating on a sea of calm I had never expected to feel again. But with family surrounding me and nourishing the seeds of myself I had feared lost forever, I could weather any storm yet to come. My second chance, our second chance together, had only just begun.